Jordan, Derek, good to see you. It's like a staff reunion.
Sure is. Good to
Great
see
to see
you,
you, Sean.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that I thought would be kind of unique about this is that three of us work for the guy in different ways, and very few people get a window into who he is and how he operates. And so let's just start with this. How do you guys think, first Jordan and then Derek, like when you look at how this administration is operating in this White House, what stands out to you about what's different and what's the same? Jordan, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think what you've seen right now is a pretty cohesive unit that seems to be everybody's rowing in the right direction. And I think it's allowed the president an opportunity to execute on his agenda swiftly. And I think it's, the sequencing this time around, how they're doing things, it seems to really be working. So, I've been very impressed thus far, and, it's seems like it's a team, and, it's seems to be going pretty well.
Derek, do you look at it and like I joke, half joking, kind of sort of serious, when I watch how Caroline's doing, and I say, I'm a bit jealous from time to time that there's a much more of a sense of control and command. As the former staff secretary, do you look at it and say, hey, we had a good process, it worked well for us, and I think it's working well for Will Scharf? Or are there aspects of it where you're like, wow, it's so much better to watch how they're doing it?
Yeah, I think, with every iteration, like things got better. We got better with each day and passing month and week of the first administration. And, I think they're building on a lot of the foundation that was set back then and taking it to the next level. Will has obviously evolved the staff secretary role. And now he's, giving briefings effectively to the press about the content of the executive orders. And
would you have wanted to do that? Would you have wanted to do that?
Me, Sean, I've sort of evolved myself into this role of appearing in any sort of video form. So back then wasn't for me. Maybe now, with the role that he's playing, sure. But I think, it's just a different environment.
Trump's idea or Will's idea? Like, you know what I mean? Like this to me was an interesting way of presenting the executive orders. And he sits there and says, Mr. President, this is an executive order which will allow you to do the following because blah, 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 blah. And then Trump says, thank you. And he signs it. Is that, you think, something that Trump wanted to do and said, Will, present this? Or do you think that the staff secretary's office said, hey, we have an idea to showcase the executive orders?
I think it was probably the president. I think the president saw Will on his feet representing him, in court over the last, 4 years, and felt like, yeah, I've seen this guy. I know he can present. I know he's smart. I have total confidence in him, and let's give him a chance. The president likes to let people shine around him as long as it doesn't, take away from his shine. And I think Will's doing a great job in that regard. He's, presenting the orders and teeing up the president to deliver the message to the American people.
Have you seen the memes where people have dubbed him, the AI memes, and it's like, Mr. President, this is an executive order that will ban skinny jeans and there will no longer be. And
Mr. President, this next executive order will criminalize skinny jeans for all youth pastors everywhere in the universe. It says, quote, skinny jeans are not hip or fire or even rad, and they just simply look dumb.
Like, I am getting such a kick out of seeing those things on Instagram where they dub them over. It's like that. Remember when the House vote for Speaker was happening and they did those fake things where they made everyone talk to? I get a kick out of watching them now.
I've no problem not being a meme, but I have to say some of those some of them are hilarious. They're a lot. Yeah. They're a lot of fun, and I think Will. And my guess is Will gets a kick out of them too, because so far I think they're in good fun.
Have you talked to Will? Do you guys trade notes?
Yeah, before he went in, he touched base with me, I think, as a matter of like good due diligence. I've known Will for years.
Oh, really?
Will and I, we knew each other back during the first Trump administration, through the legal circles, and have stayed in touch, and watched him through his run at AG. And so, yeah, he reached out early on actually and said, what's the job like? And I kind of gave him my impressions of it. And then when he got the job, he said, I'd like to sit down and pick your brain. So we did that, and I sort of told him, the full panoply of things that he has to do. But I told him one important thing. I said, as much as the basics of the job will be the basics of the job, no one can tell you what it's going to be like to be staff secretary to Donald Trump, not me and not Rob Porter, because it is a role that he evolves, the president will slot you in to do what he would like you to do in that role. So I was different than Rob, Will's different from me. And the most obvious and evident example of that is the reading of the executive orders. But I know that behind the scenes, like the function, it's built probably 80% the same, but 20% of it is a new environment. Because the players are different. The president is using his staff in new and different ways. And so the role has to change.
Jordan, what about you? Did you talk to your successor in that role right now as Director of Oval Operations, Oval Office? That's a mouthful. Oval Office Operations, OOO.
So I knew, so Walt kind of has that job now, and he was on he was on the military side when I was there. So I worked very closely with him when he was the valet, and he is great. He gets the president, understands the job, so I can't speak highly enough about Walt. So I think he's doing a really great job, and he's been with the president now for, almost, he's been with him a while,
Yeah, So do me a favor. I want both of you to take a second. I'll start with you, Jordan, since you mentioned it. Walk me through what the Director of Oval Office Operations does. And you mentioned Walt, who is now kind of taking that job. He was a valet in the first administration. I remember him. So can you just explain to people what those two roles are?
Yeah. So, my job was kind of dual hatted. So I was the Director of Oval Office Operations and the president's personal aide. And, the outer oval, which is where I resided, which is the office just outside the door of the oval. It's a hubbub of activity. So in my job as Director of Oval Office Operations and personal aide, the first thing I would do, I would usually get into work about 8:00, and I would kind of start reviewing the day and making sure if there was a speech that day, maybe calling over to staff sec, asking Derek, like, hey, do we have the speech? Kind of playing traffic cop a little bit. Just really having a good understanding. I was looking long-term, but I was more preparing for my first interaction with the president that morning. So, so
how does that happen? Does he walk down and you're standing there waiting for him? Or does he call down, or do you go to him?
No. So
how does that day start?
So he's up very early.
Yes.
He's working, he's doing phone calls, all sorts of stuff. And then typically his first meeting of the day was the presidential daily briefing. So I would go up to his residence about 30 minutes before that meeting and kind of sit there and wait for him to come out. And, if we were getting close to it, you go and knock on the door, or, the secretary or John Kelly would call and be like, hey, are you guys coming down? Be like, yeah, we're down, coming in a minute. So anyways, he would come out. And then basically that probably 3.5 minute walk from his residence to the Oval Office was kind of, I gave him the rundown of the day. And then he told me things.
So you're the first person he sees every day.
Yes. Yeah.
So right off the bat, is he upset? Is he in a good mood? Is he in a bad mood?
You got to be prepared for, as Derek was alluding to earlier, anybody can get any job or ask any question, right? So I made sure, outside of knowing what he was doing that day, I had a very strong understanding of what was going on in the world and the country that day, because he's going to ask about it, inevitably.
So give me an example. You see him, he opens the door, you're waiting for him, and what's one? You don't have to be.
What do you think?
Does he say to you, what happened in Rwanda last night?
What do you think we should do in Afghanistan? Right. And what
do you say?
I would give the answer of, hey, sir, you should talk to, General Mattis. And always, no, what do you think? And I'd be like, well, we've been there a while, sir. But here's the thing with Donald Trump that you guys know. He respects everybody's opinions just the same. So whether you are the secretary of an agency, or you're the press secretary or director of Oval Office Operations, or you're a cook in the back of a hotel, and he asks you a question, he listens. He wants the answer. He's very inquisitive that way, and he takes more inputs than any president in history, right?
I'm glad you said that. It's the same thing. It's amazing. I loved at one point early on, he was hearing from the generals. You bring up Afghanistan. And he literally said, get me a bunch of enlisted folks that have served in Afghanistan in the Roosevelt Room, and no generals allowed. And I just want to hear from these enlisted guys about their experience. I loved walking before he was President Trump. I walked through at least 2 of his hotels with him, and just watching him interact with the staff. What do you guys think? What's happening? What do you think there? How come that painting isn't? I mean, like, he's so detail oriented and interactive with the folks. Derek, give us an example on your end. Like, what does the staff secretary do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. So, I mean, our job is to, make sure that the paperwork that goes to the Oval Office is ready to go to the Oval Office. So we spend our days coordinating executive orders and presidential memoranda, letters to foreign leaders, speeches, you name it, anything that sort of press releases, anything that's got like a big, public facing impact other than the tweets at back then. And so, and that's our job. Yeah. Now the truth. That's our job, is to sort of make sure that paper was ready for him, so that if we put it in front of him, we could tell him what it is, we would brief him on it, and he would know that it was ready to sign and ready to go for him. So, that's the core of our job. I always say we looked at it through legal, policy, and political lenses to make sure that those sort of 3 bases were covered for him, and then present it to him. Obviously, that puts you in the room with him quite a lot, and you end up, taking on direction back from him. Tell so-and-so to do such and such, or tell so-and-so to come see me about X, Y, or Z. And then he also asks you, and I could tell, like, the President Trump is an amazing reader of people, an amazing reader of body language, an amazing reader of just, that energy that you're putting off. And so I could always tell that, if I was giving him something and I would tell him what it was, he'd just say like, okay. And he'd like start signing it, or he'd look at me and he would say, what do you think? And I'd say, well, like, this is what the cabinet secretaries are saying, and this is what your advisors are saying. And, everybody's pretty much in line with it. He's like, yeah, but like, does anybody have a problem with it? And I'm like, well, actually, like, there's a little bit of an objection from, Secretary whatever. And, but we worked it out. And he said, have that person call me. I want to talk to them about it. I want to hear what they have to say about it. Or, maybe we need to convene a meeting about this. Like, have these 3 people, let's set it up. And, it was always just a read that he had. He could always just tell if something was a little bit, a little bit askew. And it was the same way with speeches. We would try to make the speech process go smoothly, because he would know instantly if he had given us an edit and we hadn't been able to get it in time, or if something was wrong with the teleprompter or something like that. He would just know. And then, then he would say to himself, like, okay, like, the show must go on, but I can't trust, what's happening here. So I'm going to go give the show. So he was just an amazing reader of situations. He would always know if something was a little bit off. And, so that's, we want to present to him that everything was the way that he wanted it to be. And sometimes he would ask, he would say, I told you to put this in there. Is it in there? And he would say, yeah, it's in there. And then he would say, show me. And you're like, okay. And you show him. And if it wasn't exactly, like, if you had to make a change for one reason or another, like, I don't know, maybe there's a grammar issue, or maybe it just didn't fit on the page in the right way, or maybe there was like some little tweak that, you thought, he would say, that's not how I put it. You're like, you're right. That's, I learned that, it didn't take me long, but I learned that pretty quickly. Like, just put it how he wanted it. And so that's what we would, how it would be.
I remember the first joint address, and we were literally doing practice sessions. He was making the edits. And then at one point he was like, no, you guys I'm not going to come back until you've done, like, I've given you the edits. They're not in the speech. Cause like, there was like, again, pushback. Well, I don't know that we need that line. He was like, I'm not asking. Put it in the speech. I'll read it, but I'm not going to, he got really frustrated. It was funny how exactly what you're saying. I'm having like PTSD as you're talking about it, but when you guys have both seen these situations, he's asking you an opinion, and you're absolutely right. The thing that I think most people get wrong about him is that he actually is more solicitous of opinion than most people, right? Normally the opinion, the decision gets put in front of Mr. President. Everybody agrees on this. Please sign the thing. And he'll, to your point, Derek, he'd say to me, so what is everyone saying? And I said, well, it's the most part, but here so-and-so doesn't. Did you ever get crossways with like the chief of staff or whatever? It was like, why did you tell him that there were 5 people who opposed this? Because now you just slowed the train down, Jordan?
Well, I think, when I was there was a really good group that were around the president, right? You know, Derek and Johnny DeStefano and Sarah Sanders and, you know, you when you were there, and a couple other folks. You know, there was a core of like 8 to 10 of us. And I would say philosophically, we all kind of thought the same way, or at least would answer the question the same way, if it got posed to us. And I think the other thing we did, which is, you know, kind of showed our level of teamwork, was if he talked to me in the morning about a press issue, right, I would call Sarah and be like, hey, Sarah, he's talking about this. Or, you know, if he wanted to do something, you know, I'd call John Kelly and be like, hey, this came up. Or, you know, Derek or Johnny or Stephen Miller would come up to me and be like, hey, he's asking about this. So when you see him next, he's probably going to ask you about it. So I think we did a good job of kind of keeping everybody briefed up on kind of the interactions so that he wasn't getting, at least from those close around him, you know, varying inputs on things. But that being said, you know, he can suss out if you're not giving him what you think. Right. And as he did with me with Afghanistan, right? Like, I don't want to be responsible for like giving the wrong information on Afghanistan, but he's like, I want to know what your opinion is. Like, tell me. And if you don't, like, he'll keep asking until you give him your opinion. Right.
But did anyone ever say to you, hey, Jordan, what did you just do? I mean, like, I agree with you 100%. He'd say to me, Sean, don't you think this? And I'd be like, well, actually, that's the Secretary of Treasury. And he'd be like, yeah, so what? But what do you think? And I think that I was always afraid of getting crosswise with the subject matter expert or the department or the cabinet secretary. And it's like, okay, well, you asked my opinion. I'm going to give it to you. Did anyone ever say afterwards, like, Jordan, what are you doing? Like that's not your place and you screwed it up?
I did not have that happen. So
really?
I don't think so.
Derek, how about you?
You know, there was one, I can think of one time, wasn't the chief of staff, but it was, you know, it was some folks, it was like, you know, it was an issue on vaping products. And, you know, I just had an opinion that, you know, we needed to talk about it a little bit more because there were some considerations that I felt like hadn't been addressed. You know, but I felt like that was my job. I mean, people weren't thrilled about it. They had to go and, you know, have a meeting about it. But at the end of the day, you know, I think the process was improved. I think the outcome was improved. And at least, you know, I always felt like he should be getting, if he wanted it, you know, he should get the full panoply of views. And so I think people sort of expected me to do that. You know, I wasn't, you know, I never, if I had just ran in and said, okay, like this is the play and like it's somebody's play and I'm running it, like the staff secretary's office loses its credibility at that point. We have to sort of be an honest broker. So I think nobody ever yelled at me for really like presenting like alternative opinions. I think a couple of times, maybe some exasperation that, you know, another meeting was required. But again, that wasn't, you know, I always say that's not because of anything I did. That's the president wanted that meeting. If he had been satisfied that he had been properly staffed and briefed, there would be no meeting. So those were the types of things that, you know, I think would sometimes happen. But I can't remember a time anybody pulled me aside because either we had baked it beforehand and it was fine, or it was him and not me who had said, I want to hear more about this. For the most part.
And I would even tell, you know, if I had a conversation with him that was relevant to an agency, like I would sometimes talk to the cabinet secretary and be like, hey, this is on his mind. And I can tell you a funny story when we were in Finland for the Russia-US summit with President Trump and Putin. And, you know, Finland, we're there in the summer, you know, they're not really known for their air condition. The boss's room was pretty hot. Like the military guys had jerry-rigged like some air conditioner in there. And anyways, the room was hot, right? And we had to get it fixed. But then he asked me in the morning, he goes, who picks the hotel rooms? And there's a difference between who picks them and who pays for them. They're picked by the White House. They're paid for by the State Department. I knew he was not happy with the hotel room. So I was like, well, the State Department, sir. And he goes, okay. So later that day, him and Mike Pompeo, they're riding back from a meeting.
Oh, I know where this is going.
and you know, we all walk up together. The president goes in his room. And Secretary Pompeo, I grabbed him. I was like, "Hey, sir, I was going to tell you something." He was asking about who pays for the hotels, who picks them. I said the State Department, and he was like, "That's funny." On the car ride over, he asked me the same question. I told him, "You pick them." I was like, "Touche."
How did that end up?
Touche.
Oh, wait, did he bring it back up again?
No one brought it back up again.
When I look at this White House, I get the sense that, Derek, you're talking about the people, whatever, that there were a lot more people in at least the beginning part of the first Trump administration that would intentionally slow walk things that he wanted done. And this time, I think there are clearly a lot more people around him that he feels comfortable with that are on board on the agenda. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think he's definitely got a lot of people around him who he's more comfortable with, people that he's been with throughout for almost in some cases a decade. So there's no sort of in the getting to know you period, or
right.
Does he said this? Did he mean that, or do we need to talk to him about it again? They've seen him, they've talked to him a number of times, they've seen him execute. So it's that sort of get to know you phase, that learning curve is gone. And I think that he's been clear about what he wants to do for now 8 or 9 years, and so it's much easier, I think, for people to execute. Plus, you have to remember there's like a different political environment as well. His election was much different this time around than it was in 2016. Swing states, all the swing states, popular vote, et cetera. Both houses of Congress are in not only in Republican hands, but in the hands of Republicans that he created in many ways. So it's just there's no sort of friction there. The people around him are people he's been grown comfortable with. They know when he's serious. They know when he's feeling things out. And so, there's just much less friction in the environment. I don't think it was a lot of bad faith. I mean, there may be some bad faith back then by people who, had different agendas. The agenda has been moved. He's got control of the agenda. But I think the biggest feature is just the friction's gone. There's a comfort level, and there's a political environment that allows for that train to move forward.
I want to ask you the same question, Jordan, but as a guy who was there, like literally the first person you saw in the morning and outside the Oval every day, I think what Derek said is so telling, right? You mentioned Walt, the Nolta, the guy who was his valet and has been with him now, literally, I guess, about a decade. And some of the other cabinet members, even Caroline, she was there during the campaign and it served him in the first administration. How much, just as you look back and observe this, does that count for the success that they're having, those personal relationships? Because would you be the guy that would say, hey, I know you really don't know him well, but did you have to give advice to people as they met with him? Like, please don't go in there guns a-blazing, he'll shoot you down. Because I feel like now you watch that cabinet meeting they had earlier this week, there's a sense of comfort that just didn't exist. I mean, I think you guys said it, but it was like we were still get to know each other. This time it's like a reunion.
Yeah, I think, when President Trump came to town in 2017, he was coming as a businessman, right? He had not worked, lived, operated in DC. So, in terms of political friends, right, he was kind of coming to the town empty-handed in some respect. And this time around, he has friends on Capitol Hill. He has people in DC he knows. He has a White House staff that's been with him longer. And when you look back at other presidents, right, all of these guys prepared their entire lives for the job, right? Which means that they had, staffs as governors, staffs as senators, all that sort of stuff. So they had a robust Rolodex to pull from. And this time around, he has that Rolodex, right? So if you walk in there and you're talking about jobs, about people to hire, he's going to know the people. Last time around, I think he kind of took people's advice and opinions, but he actually knows these people this time. So he's able to pick the folks that he wants. And back to what I said earlier, this team is clearly rowing in the same direction. And I think Susie Wiles has done a tremendous job, the beginning of our administration, there were a couple different power centers in the White House. There's one power center right now with Susie, which I think allows the train to be a little more on the tracks and on time in terms of process, organization, all that sort of stuff.
A lot of people wonder, I mean, I get asked all this time, Wick, how little does that guy sleep? Because it seems like he's up late and up early. Jordan, is that something that like you were shocked by? How true is it in terms of your interactions? That's probably the guy you saw him last and then first.
No, he's a workhorse. He doesn't stop, and it's a challenge to keep up with him. Even, I think then I was the spry age of 34, but he would often run circles around me and, having to keep up with him. But yeah, no, he's up early in the morning, and, same thing late at night. Air Force One has a bed on it, right? And if I was the president,
yeah,
I would have spent a lot of time in that bed on all of these long flights we're doing around the world. President Trump never went in that bed once.
Are you kidding me?
I think that's right. And it's not just any bed, right? It's
nice.
His exact bed. It's the same bed he sleeps in at the White House, is my understanding.
I've been in the bedroom. I just never actually thought to ask if he was. I mean, believe me, there were plenty of times when you just get hauled up to the cabin. I never thought about that. I didn't really see him sleep, but I never thought he wasn't, because I didn't have eyes on him the whole time.
No, and it was the airplane is a nice escape for the staff, because when you get on the plane, everybody you need to talk to is there, right? So you're not having to do emails, calls, right? Like it's a peaceful experience on some level. And because he never, he was kind of, working most of these flights, you couldn't necessarily just go find a corner and go sleep for 12 hours because you might get, called up or something. But yeah, no, he's a charger for sure.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.